Okay, hey, we're back. We haven't. There hasn't been much to talk about lately with the Vikings. This is one. It's been one of the dead periods in the NFL calendar. Uh, but it's draft time. It's draft day. Um, Almost didn't remember to do this. This draft is not nearly the feverishly anticipated one that we had last year because everyone, we had a much higher pick and everybody pretty much knew we were gonna be taking a quarterback. Um, this year we just got picked 24, so we're not gonna even pick until very late in the evening, and who knows what Quasey has up his sleeve. I think there's a possibility he might trade down because we only have 4 picks total. We got the first, we got a third, and then I think we have a fifth and a sixth. Because those 2 trades we made last year, the little one to move up a spot to get McCarthy, and then especially that one to get Dallas Turner, kind of depleted our 2026 stockpile. Um, but and I think the third that we got now was even a comp pick. But so there's not that much. We're not going to be adding. We're not going to be adding. 10 players this weekend. But I think there's a chance of trading down. Certainly to get a couple extra picks. As far as like needs on the roster, we signed so many guys in free agency, and I think Kwesi was kicking ass in free agency this year. We don't have a lot of real obvious like major holes. Not that we're perfect. Not that it's a perfect roster. Not saying that, but you're coming off a 14-3 season, and I think you greatly improved the roster. Now, so much the whole season is going to depend on, is JJ McCarthy good, and is he good immediately? Because if he is, this is a Super Bowl contender. If he's not, well, we still could be a playoff contender. Of course, we don't necessarily have a QB2 right now. I suppose I can talk about that afterwards. But as far as like like even by the usual standards, every year I get less interested in the whole mock draft situation. Occasionally I'll play around in the simulators that you find online where you can pick, but it's just names. I don't know who any of these people are. I mildly familiar with a couple names just because I see them pop up a lot on the simulators. As far as like they are really in a good spot to just do best player available. My addendum to that is always best player available at a position of need. And there's a few positions that I don't think, I've seen people say we might take a running back in the first round. I really would find that bizarre to do that because they re-signed Aaron Jones. They traded for Jordan Mason, which I think is going to be a hell of a trade that they made. Like, would you need 3 running backs? I mean, but I think I still think defense is where they if I had to like pick, here, go do this, I would go defense still, even with all the additions they've made. You know, you know, One of the things, like all the free agent signings and stuff. Well, that means you're a little older. They are. I think last year they had one of the oldest rosters in the NFL, and they went out and signed a bunch more free agents. So that's probably still going to be the case. And even if the guys you think they're good, a couple of the guys we signed, do have a bit of an injury history, so you got to be a little wary of that. I would certainly say, cornerback is kind of just, it's an evergreen need. It's just I know we've taken so many cornerbacks in the first round, in the last decade and change, that it's kind of become a joke, kind of a running joke amongst the fans. Like, oh, Vikings going to take another cornerback. But you might need to, because, we made a couple moves, in free agency, but we don't also let a few guys go. who in a couple cases I think guys are still available. I haven't followed the stuff as closely as maybe other years I do, but I know you know there might be a couple of our guys still out there. If we want to still bring them back in here. Um, but we always need cornerbacks. I mean, it's a pass happy league. You need all the help you can get. So cornerback could be a position they go in round one, or interior defensive line. I think that's the position I usually end up picking when I do the simulators. And there's a couple names that have even if you don't follow the mock drafts, you still kind of end up just by osmosis seeing certain names linked to the Vikings. So there's a couple guys in the defensive interior. Obviously, you got to beef up those lines as much as you can. I mean, there's a lot of evidence lately in this league that shows that really being strong, big, beefy, strong, tough on those lines is kind of where you go. So I would probably put like 1-2 like cornerback and interior defensive line. Could go pass rusher too. You can't never have enough. We lost a couple guys free agency. I think in that obviously we're hoping for a real big breakout year or two for Dallas Turner. And of course anybody, and I've been saying this for a couple years now, anybody on defense that we get, they've got the approval of Brian Flores, and that's good enough for me. So but yeah, anything on defense would probably be my number one, except for safety. I don't think you need to get a safety, or probably not a linebacker. Linebackers are not what they used to be in terms of their importance. If they went offense, which they could, we still have one position on the offensive line that's a little shaky. Obviously we got the Darisaw coming back, off the injury. Sounds like he's progressing just fine. You do have Brian O'Neill on the other side, but he's not super young anymore. I think this is going to be like year 8 for him. So I mean, he's not like super young anymore. I don't think you draft. I wouldn't draft a tackle like in the first round because they're not going to start for at least a couple years. I mean, I would certainly want to. I mean, I pretty much always want to draft a player in the first round who's going to be able to contribute right away. Obviously, we got the 2 guys from the Colts that we signed. One's going to be the center, one's going to be guard. So we still have Blake Brandel as the other guard. Maybe, having one, not that he's terrible, but maybe having like one lesser guy on the line with the improvement of the line might not matter as much. But I mean, you could still, if there's like a good value pick there, you maybe take a guard. And the other position that sometimes gets talked about is wide receiver, which on paper would seem crazy because, you got JJ, you got Addison. The argument there is that Jordan Addison, well, one, he might get suspended for a couple games this coming year for some of his off the field issues with driving and not necessarily being sober while driving. But also, he's coming up pretty soon to get an extension of his own, and it's like, are you going to pay him a big, a giant extension when you've already got JJ and you've already got all these other players? I don't know about that. I probably wouldn't. But we beyond JJ and Addison, we're not too deep at receiver. I mean, Jalen Naylor kind of popped up a little bit last year, but then tailed off. We still don't have like a major weapon number 3. Obviously, I think we were sniffing around Cooper Kupp during free agency. I think we were kind of maybe looking at a couple other receivers. Didn't make any significant additions there. I think we signed some guy, some like journeyman type, but a case could be made that you want to give your first year starter QB every advantage possible and give him another weapon. We've obviously got, I think we got the weapons at running back. Tight end we're a little thin, but I don't think we would go tight end first round. Hopefully TJ Hawkinson is a little more of a factor, full year coming off the injury. So like top 5 just general positions, I would say like interior defensive line, cornerback, guard, wide receiver, and fifth spot, take a pick, maybe a safety or something. But I think there's a decent chance of trading down, get a couple more picks. Kwesi hasn't necessarily, aced those value trades. I still maintain that the problem with the Lewis Cine trade was not necessarily that they made the trade or even who they made it with. It's just that they blew the pick. he blew the pick after the trade. If they had drafted a really good player with that Lewis Cine pick, I don't think anybody would really care that much. We wouldn't still be hearing about Kyle Hamilton 3 years later. And of course, Kwesi, he still has not gotten a contract extension in this offseason. So he is essentially, I think the idea that he's in danger of losing his job or something is ludicrous, because ultimately they've won 13 plus games in 2 of his 3 seasons here. And whatever J.J. McCarthy is, that's going to determine Kwesi's future. If we come out of this season, even if we're not like a Super Bowl contender, even if we end up winning like, I don't know, 10, 11 games, but we're not a Super Bowl contender, but J.J. McCarthy looks like he's the real deal, I think Kwesi is safe. I don't think there's anything to worry about with that. But it's the fact that it hasn't happened yet, that they didn't give him an extension. They did give KOC his extension. It's something to look at and something to kind of keep an eye on. But I don't think that like as an organization or something they're like anti-Kwesi and they're like, we kind of want to get rid of this guy. I think it's just, he does have stuff to prove. I mean, they've won games. They haven't won any playoff games yet. Most of his like free agency decisions I think have been great. The drafts have been shaky, and there's no question about it. Now I think, as important as pick 24 is this year, I think what we see this year from McCarthy and Turner, I think is going to be even more important, because the extra assets that you traded to get those 2 guys is why you only have 4 picks this year. So it's going to be maybe it'll mean less time actually watching the draft, which can be kind of a mind-numbing experience to keep watching it. But I hoping we get at least something good out of the number 1 pick and the number 3 pick. The later round picks are always just a shot in the dark. So yeah, QB2 is still a drama. With that's been kind of the number 1 thing with the Vikings probably in the last the last month or whatever, since free agency kind of quieted down. We still don't have a set QB2. There have been a lot of veterans out there that have been talked about. A lot of them have then signed places. Like Joe Flacco signed with Cleveland, and that was one. I can't remember who. There's still some guys out there. A lot of the talk is that we're waiting till after the draft to sign a veteran quarterback as QB2, just because of the effect it has on the compensation pick formula. I don't really understand all that. But I mean, there's still some guys out there they can sign, and then there's still a little bit, and obviously the Aaron Rodgers thing, that he still isn't signed either, but we're not signing him no matter how much certain reporters insist that we still might. I like that he wanted to come here and we refused. But there's Kirk buzz. There is. You know, I won't go on of this one for too long, but you know, there is still some buzz that the Falcons are gonna try to get rid of Kirk. Get off that contract, which was a bad contract, and I would not have signed Kirk for that money coming off the injury, and maybe the injury means he can't play anymore. But you know, you know, under the circumstances of what you could, you know, possibility of getting him for cheap, I think I think there is a scenario, and maybe it's like a 5% chance it even happens, but there's a scenario where, hey, maybe you basically trade just for like cap relief for Atlanta. Maybe we've got some cap. Maybe we'll pick up a little bit of the money, and we don't have to really trade you anything. Because I don't know if there's a lot of trade value necessarily with Kirk, because he's such an uncertainty. I mean, maybe it just was a separate injury last year and it kind of screwed him up because he was playing well for a while. But I don't know that anyone's going to necessarily trade for him to be a starter, and he wouldn't be a starter here. And that's why I don't get why people are so angry about even bringing up the name. It's like he'd be a guy, assuming he's not, dead set on still being a starting quarterback, because that might not be up to him at this point. I think he would be a great backup QB idea. Kind of a mentor. I mean, he's never really been that. He hasn't been a backup since the very beginning of his career when he was backing up RG3. But I mean, he ain't going to be a starter in Atlanta. So barring like an injury there. But I would 100% be fine with bringing Kirk in. I mean, I wouldn't trade like significant assets for him, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe this would be a thing where almost like they'll give you something just to take the player and get the cap relief. What was the Brock Osweiler trade from years ago where I forget who traded him to where for what, but it was kind of a similar thing where it's like we're almost like giving him away just because we want the cap relief. Maybe you get a little something. Maybe you get a draft pick or something. I don't think any of that's going to happen. Like what happened till after the draft too. But and again, I think it's a very slim chance it happens. But I would welcome it because I like the guy, and I think he'd be a terrific backup. And if worst case scenario, JJ is either really struggling or gets hurt again, maybe Kirk can step in. I don't know what Kirk's health situation is at this point, though. Can he really play? But he knows the offense, so it's not like you'd have to bring some new guy in and teach him an offense. It's like he already knows it. So it'd be like, I know they like having the extra QB minds, in the room. So anyway, we'll see what happens with QB2. I don't think anything's going to happen until sometime after the draft. There are still a couple of names out there. I mean, there's no names out there that are like exciting, because why would they be exciting? But they're going to sign someone. I really don't. Even if they love Brett Rippon, I don't think they're going to go into the season with Brett Rippon as the only veteran backup for JJ McCarthy. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, but that's for future stuff. I've gone on almost 20 minutes. This is wrong. So yeah, draft night tonight. See what happens. Hopefully we get a good player, because we need to, we need to hit on these picks in a big way. We need a big impact first rounder. We haven't done that great on those in the Kwesi era, but get another piece for KOC and company to tinker with. And I mean, again, if JJ McCarthy is good right away, this is absolutely a Super Bowl contending football team. So every little bit helps.